Now is the time.
Forever? Tangent. Old.
Halt.
Hashtag always MGM.
You are approaching the unloading area.
Calm down. AK haters.
But what if it could?
Behold the
Disney
majesty of the
breeze.
Sistine Ceiling.
For the kids.
A salute to all theme parks, but mostly Walt Disney World.
Ha! What a cute ending.
Aloha and
Don't Dillo it.
This is Theme Park Thursday with Dillo's Diz. She is Jen.
Hello.
And I am Frank, and we are here in the month of June. June is busting out all over, so much so that we're recording this episode in May.
We continue to be ahead of the game. Here's the thing. I'll keep it brief because we have very exciting guests and I want to get to them. But we have been doing this podcast for 7 years. We're known for not planning. Typically, we do these episodes like the night before or a few days before we put them out. But this year, in 2025, we have been way ahead of the game. And I'm starting to feel like we need to go back to the old way because it's making time go by way too fast. I don't need another thing in my life making time go by too fast.
No, yeah, halfway through 2025 already, basically, is what we're saying here at the beginning of this episode, which is wild to consider. But for those of you listening to this audio podcast for the first time here in the month of June, Jen and I are siblings.
We are.
I am the older sibling.
Much older, yes.
By a whole 7.5 years. So we always love when we, connect with other siblings. And that's what we have here today.
Yeah, I know. And I was trying to think, are they the first sibling pair we've had?
I think there's been one other. We have to think on this.
We might have to fact check that. Either way, I'm excited because it's a rare thing. So
yeah. It's a rare occasion, but we're excited because it's coupled with what has been happening a lot, starting at the end of 2024, but into 2025, which is we have made these connections with lifelong Disney cast members, past and present, authors who were inspired by Disney, folks who worked at Disney and then took it into a whole other career. That has been like a theme the last 6 months or so, and then we're continuing on that path today.
Yeah, and they tie into a little bit of our backgrounds for our time at Disney.
A little bit of both. You as an operating participant at Epcot, me as a cast member at #AlwaysMGM in the 90s. Of course, since you're younger, that was the mid 2000s for you.
Yes.
And so just to put that all in perspective. But today, I mean, look, there's going to be so much we're going to talk about. There's going to be so many tangents we're going to go on. But Rick and Bob Allen are here. We're gonna bring them in. We're gonna start at the very beginning because it starts with a certified Disney legend. But let's introduce, with over 100 years combined of Disney magic experience, it's Rick and Bob Allen. Rick and Bob, hello.
Hello, Jen and Frank.
Thank you guys so much for being here. This is so exciting. And there's so many things that we can possibly touch on here in this episode. But I do want to start at the beginning because your father is a Disney legend. So just as like an origin story all on its own, who wants to start talking about your dad?
Bob, since you're like Frank, the oldest, why don't you dive in, out of respect for your age? Yeah, well, as I was saying, as the better looking brother, I'm happy to step up and take the mantle of this initial story. Sure, it goes kind of like this. Petty Officer Second Class Robert C. Allen comes home from his stint in the Navy in the Korean War. And he's met by his lovely wife and this 9-month-old kid who evidently he liked me, but it dawned on him that, boy, this thing's going to want to eat and stuff. I probably better get a job. So my recollection, and I don't know this to be totally true, this part, but my recollection is my dad's older brother, who also lived in Anaheim, California, where we live, said, hey, there's a place down the street
from where you guys live. It's hiring. You should go down there. So Dad goes down to Disneyland and, stands in line and, tries to get a job. Rick, you pick it up because it gets better.
Well, yeah, and so it turns out he doesn't get a job for a couple of times, but he kept going back and he kept going back, and Dad wore a tie and got all dressed up and ready to go, and finally he got hired, and big long line to get hired, and he asked him, he said, "Hey, by the way, I got to ask you, why'd you hire me out of all these people out here?" And the casting guy said, "Well, you know what? You're the only guy out there wearing a tie, so I figure we ought to let you in."
And Dad had a great job on opening day. His job was he rode in the caboose of the Casey Jr., which was the little train that ran around Storybook Land and Fantasyland back then. And he wore a white costume. He rode in the caboose and he had a whistle. And his job was, if anybody falls off, blow the whistle.
But that was Disney's safety back in 1955. It's changed a little bit.
Yeah. There's a few more things in place, but I think also having a whistle might, be a good solution sometimes now. Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
I don't think I know anyone who ever's been through traditions to ever tell a story of like, oh, the first key is about safety, and that's a great example of how far that story goes back. Come on.
Yeah. It started with it all back then, but that gave us a chance. We got this chance to grow up then. Since Dad was worked at Disneyland back then, we got this great opportunity to grow up in an unusual way. We got to spend all our birthdays at Disneyland. We got to, Tom Sawyer's Island was where we lived. And
he was careful about that. He didn't want it to wear out. Yeah. So you didn't get to go all the time. You got to go on your birthday, and there was the obligatory trip with the grandmas at Christmas,
right,
when the decorations were out, Fantasyland Parade was out. But it wasn't like, we did spend an inordinate amount of time there. Rick's right about Tom Sawyer's Island. It actually used to really frustrate our dad. He'd take us out there for our birthday with our little denizen buddies, and we'd sprint for Tom Sawyer's Island, and we'd stay on it for 6 hours. And it's like, I take you guys to the greatest place in the world. It's got 53 rides and attractions, and you spend 6 hours, groveling around in the dirt. And we said, but the thing was, we were Southern California's suburban kids. The thought that there would be a cave, even standing water, puddles fascinated us. So that was all really real for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you, Bob, you got to hang out at the Golden Horseshoe, right? Growing up.
I did. Once in a while, Dad would take me to work with him, probably to keep my mother from tossing me out. But I'd go to work with him. And he was later in his mid-career, I guess, at Disneyland. He got promoted. He went from being an hourly entertainment guy to being the assistant supervisor in Frontierland. And when you're the assistant supervisor in Frontierland, one of the things you have is the Golden Horseshoe Review. So I spent a lot of time hanging out backstage at the Golden Horseshoe when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, talking, hanging out with Wally Bogue and Fulton Burley and Betty Taylor. And I used to tease the neighborhood kids. I had seen more pretty girls in their underwear by the time I was 10 than any of my buddies did in their whole life, probably. Because, their cat dancers don't care. Hi, kid. How you doing?
Yeah. Right.
That's amazing.
That was pretty golden. And remember I think we both got to see this. I got my memory too about the Tinkerbell. Remember when Tinkerbell first flew? Dad, snuck us back behind Main Street. So when she was first flying, she'd come off of the castle, Sleeping Beauty's castle, and come flying back.
Well, she actually came off the Matterhorn.
Oh, the Matterhorn. That's right. Of course,
top of the Matterhorn.
Yeah, top of the Matterhorn. But landed back behind Main Street, right? If I remember right. The point of the story was, you think of her as being Tinkerbell and looking like Tinkerbell. And she was over 70 years old.
She was a circus performer.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
You think, where's Walt going to find somebody that's going to make that trip, right? From the
Go find a trapeze artist,
And so that was just one of the wildest things.
Later on, when I was in entertainment at Disneyland, launching Tink was great duty. It was considered great duty. You'd go up and say, okay, have a good flight. Throw her off the mountain.
There she goes. Yeah. Oh my God. What a wild childhood.
It's funny though. We didn't know any better.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was
Right.
just
It was just,
the way life was. We
yeah.
didn't. We did. I'm not sure I ever thought about it, to be honest, because it sort of
Mhm.
just continued to flow that way.
Yeah.
It was just how things were.
Yeah.
And we watched the Mickey Mouse Club at home every afternoon, like every other kid
Yeah.
did that age, and it was a big piece of the United States cultural zeitgeist in
Mhm.
the late 50s and early 60s, because it was when Disney was really emergent and began to become pop culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you talk about Dad, and by the way, Bob and I promise we're going to let you both talk here. In
No,
a minute.
you're fine.
Like,
We
good.
can
uh,
listen
We
to
love
you
it.
guys
We'll
all
be-
day.
we'll
We
be-
can just go.
I had coffee to stay up this late, so I'm wired up. But Dad's career continued on, and like you were so kind to have looked him up, and that he is an official Disney legend and all that, and
Mhm.
that's nice for you to say. He got to work with Walt. Have you both heard of Celebrity Sports Center? It's a place that was in Denver, Colorado, and
Okay.
well, Bob, maybe you're a little bit better at telling that story, but back 1964, right? Well, maybe the job hunt might be
Well,
the-
we moved in '64,
right.
because I will never, because I was in the 4th grade and the years numbers were the same. But
Yeah.
the story kind of goes like this: Dad was in Frontierland doing his job, gets a call on the radio, come to the office. He said, okay.
Mhm.
Went to the office, and he went to the office. And they said, hey, Bob my dad's name was Bob, just like mine. Said, hey, Bob, Card Walker wants to talk to you. It's the president of Walt Disney Productions. And then the way I always tell the story is that's like a 4-star admiral talking to an ensign.
Mhm.
But Dad,
Mhm.
first name company, okay.
Yeah.
So he calls him back and says, Bob, Walt is a part owner of this family recreation center in Denver, Colorado called Celebrity Sports Center. And it was called that because his other partners were Art Linkletter and Jack Benny and a whole bunch of Hollywood celebrities.
Oh my goodness.
And he said, Walt's buying his partners out. He wants to own it outright.
Mhm.
And we want you to be the first general manager. We want you to go Disneyize that place.
Hmm.
And Dad was a very thoughtful guy. So he said, well, Card, what an honor. I really appreciate it. I need to talk to my wife.
Mhm.
And Card said, great. You go home, talk to your wife, and give me a call. Give me a call back.
Yeah.
So Dad goes home, talks to Mom. Hey, I got this opportunity, Denver, Colorado, promotion. Mom's like, absolutely not. We're not doing that. I've got, a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old, and however old I was. We live 20 miles from both sets of our parents. They help me out all the time. We're still paying off this. We are not moving across the country.
Hmm.
And Dad was a smart guy. So he said, right, you are. We're not moving. I will go tell. So he goes back the next day, calls Card. Hey, Card, I just want you to know I'm so appreciative. Thank you so much for the consideration. And I really hope there'll be another opportunity. We're going to have to pass, though. It just doesn't make sense for our family. And the way Dad would always tell the story is he'd say, Card did not take a breath. He said, right. So I'm sending the tickets over to your Frontierland office. You're going to be met in Denver this Saturday by a realtor at Stapleton Airport. He's going to show you some great houses. Bob, you and your family are going to love Colorado. So the next beat on the story is my dad didn't waste any time. He said, absolutely. I'm very much looking forward to that, Card. Thank you very much. That's what Dad would say to us when he told the stories. It was about then that I realized this had never been a request.
Yeah. This wasn't a choice.
But now he's got to go home and tell my mother, which he
Yeah.
did, and she was gracious about it. And we did move to Colorado, and we
Wow.
had a blast. It was another wonderful piece of we all learned to ski and did our Boy Scout years in the Rocky Mountains. And Celebrity Sports Center was cool. 88 bowling lanes,
Oh, wow.
the biggest number of bowling lanes under one roof in America. Huge Olympic swimming pool, a billiard room, a couple of restaurants, a fantastic arcade, which we lived in, whenever we could.
Yeah.
And then later on, they put some slot car tracks in the basement, which was all the rage in the 60s.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was great. We did our 4 years in Colorado.
Wow. Did you find caves as good there as they were in Palm Springs?
No, a bummer on the caves
Yeah.
situation. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you would think
Caves
it would
there
be
have
nice.
actual bears in them, so it's
But
Right.
they had snow and all
Yeah.
that. We ended up going back. So and maybe this we can wrap up the dad part, but Dad also got to work with Walt on Mineral King. Now that might be again. Well, you're nodding. Maybe you know Mineral King.
No, I mean it's like both of those are like in here, but I'm like I don't think I've thought about them in a very long time. Yeah.
Well, Mineral King didn't happen. Walt wanted to build just the world's best ski resort in Mineral King, California, and so Dad was the operating guy to help with the development and the plans, and so he got to work directly with him on that. Now it didn't work for all kinds of reasons, but it's just another lesson that in a company like Disney where crazy things and ideas can happen a lot, sometimes you swing for the fences and they don't go, and sometimes they do.
Oh my goodness.
No, that's wild. Yeah, and I mean, it was real cool as we were doing, research for this episode to read about your dad. And I only went to Disneyland for the first time in February after being in Walt Disney World 1,000 times, and I was really it was. I don't know, emotional might be the word, but I was so drawn to the Frontierland and Adventureland side of the park. So it's so cool to hear you talk about your dad's place there in Frontierland, because it just felt so much history on that side of the park. And it really spoke to me. I mean, I was like, no, I want to go sit inside the Golden Horseshoe. Like I that's what I was doing in Disneyland. So to hear you say that, I was like, oh no, I know it's quick service now, but it was just so cool to sit inside there, because you know the level of history that's in those areas, and that was really cool. So thanks for sharing those stories about your dad. It's really awesome.
Yeah. I love that he wanted to keep the magic too of like, don't get too used to this where this just becomes like another playground. Like it's still a special place. I love that he kind of kept that going where it's like holidays, birthdays here and there, but it wasn't a common thing.
Yeah. They, and they didn't do, even though I guess as employees, kids, we could go in and as that, but they didn't do annual passes like they, like they do now. And so that's a little bit more familiar to people that have annual passes. I mean, in Disneyland, I understand now, kids, have annual passes and they go every day after school. And so that would be, of course, that's neat, but that doesn't help keep it quite as magical.
We had Disneyland. I'm going to almost call them rituals. So here's the way it goes. There was a woman who we called Aunt Ruth. She really wasn't our aunt, but she lived down the street, and she had polio, so she walked on crutches. She was really sweet, and she worked in the main ticket booth because they had ticket books then. She worked in the main ticket booth in Fantasyland. That was her job. And so when you went to Disneyland, when we went to Disney, there were a couple things you did. The first thing you did was you ran to Tomorrowland, and you went into the AT&T attraction, and you called Mom, who was, by the way, 2 blocks away. And it was the same gag every time because they had hands-free telephones. Hey, Mom, guess what we're doing?
Guess what
we're not holding on to
at the same time.
And then
she played along. What? How is
really
this working?
If we had an extra dime, because it was only a dime, then we'd also call a grandma or two. But and then you'd go to Frontierland to see Aunt Ruth in her ticket booth, and say hi. And that always felt really special because that was my little, as a child, that Aunt Ruth was my little taste of I know some backstage stuff. I know that person.
Oh,
that's really fantastic. Well, let's get into both of your lives as cast members. I feel myself drift towards Bob as the older brothers here. So
we're gonna keep talking about that, aren't we? Man. You guys want to see my scar from the surgery?
Us youngins will stay on this side.
We'll stay on this side.
Nothing I love more than a little reincorporation. Were you the first to be employed at the park?
Probably. If you go back all the way, so my little sketchy career goes like this. The one we like to tell when we tell the story, we like to tell the first jobs I had were I was in some publicity pictures. I'm standing next to Walt and Mickey Mouse in the famous press shot when they opened the monorail station at the Disneyland Hotel. The reason I'm standing next to Walt is because I was an employee's kid. They knew I'd work for free and they'd have to pay residuals. But my first paying job, and I really wanted this job. I worked hard. In fact, in order to get this job, I had to get contact lenses, which I did just so I could get this job. I was in the 1969 cast of Fantasy on Parade, the Christmas parade, and you could be in the parade cast at 15. You didn't have to be as old. So me and a couple of other buddies of mine went out, and so that was my first job. I was a dancing Christmas tree, not a very good dancer, but a relatively good Christmas tree. And because really all you had to do to be a good tree was to be strong enough to carry the costume. We weren't even considered cast members. We were actually considered props. A different union had to work with us. That was my first job. Then I took a long hiatus and went back to the company after college. But by then Rick had already. I think you started at Walt Disney World before I went to Disneyland, didn't you? Well, hourly anyway.
Yeah, 74.
Yeah, and I didn't really start Disneyland until 76.
Okay. Yeah. You want to spring over to me on the
Sure,
the young tough kid?
So,
So I was like Bob. We both got to be on the Mickey Mouse Club. Actually, that was our sort of first.
Yeah, they used to do live shots from Disneyland, and again, they needed extras that they knew would obey, and so Mom put us in our shirts and ties, and out we went.
Yeah, we were so cute. But first paying job was in 1974 as a custodial host in Fantasyland, and I was 16 years old. And you got to do a lot of fun hourly jobs, bouncing around. I got to get to be best friends with some characters. People always ask which ones were you best friends with, and so or you get to be friends with a lot of them. But I got to be really good friends with Winnie the Pooh for a summer, so that was certainly cute. But most fun job I had was on the Jungle Cruise. I got to be a Jungle Cruise skipper, and that's a ball. That is
the dream.
that's the dream. And I would I would tell you, you do 20 spiels a day. You do 5 days a week, and you do 50 weeks a year, and that's 5,000 trips a year around the rivers of the world. And so I dream about that spiel. It's
Go ahead and do some spiel.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh no!
You got it.
Come on.
You got this.
Oh
no, the memory still works. The memory still.
All right,
works.
hold on. I've got to have a microphone.
You got a microphone.
Yeah, of course.
Hold on.
Good.
All right. Welcome aboard, thrill seekers and danger lovers. My name's Jungle Rick. I'll be your skipper and guide for the next 2.5 weeks as we travel along these rivers of adventure. But before we go too far, I want you all to do me a favor. I want you to raise your right hand. There you go. Thank you. Turn around, face the dock, wave goodbye to civilization. We may never see it again.
Give it up. All right.
Oh my God.
You still got it. You still got it. I used to like it because I had to learn the Jungle Cruise spiel at Disneyland when I worked there later as a salaried cast member. Because unlike Walt Disney World, Disneyland had at that time 42 separate trade unions. And it was a pretty good bet that one of them was out on strike almost any given day because there's so many of them. So, but there was kind of a large scale strike once. And when that would happen, it was really interesting about the Disney culture. There was a great deal of respect for the striking cast members. Our senior boss, a guy named Dick Nunes, famously would take coffee and donuts to the picket line in the morning, say, I respect you being out here. We're going to work this out. Here's some coffee and donuts. But the other side was we had to run the park. The park did not close. So you got an hourly assignment. And, I'm kind of yucky. So they gave me Jungle Cruise. But we were not disciplined. We were not afraid of WDI firing us. So we would do stuff like, how many of you see that huge spider over there? Everybody was, how many think it's bigger than the one on this lady's leg? You're not supposed to do that stuff, but I might have done that a few times.
A couple of times here and there. Yeah. Who's to say?
We can ping pong back if you want. So fast forward to 76, I'd gone to the University of Colorado and had a lot of fun in the motion picture business already and staged rock and roll concerts and did all kinds of fun media freak stuff. And the last thing in my mind was to go and work for the company my dad worked for and cut my ponytail off and go be a Disneyland guy. The last thing in the world I was going to do. The answer is no, I'm not. I'm a rock and roll guy. I'm not doing that. And then I got an opportunity to go interview with a guy named Bob Yanni, who was the vice president of entertainment then. He's a world-class showman. and he kind of made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And the way I always like to characterize it is Disneyland had both of the things I liked. On one hand, they had storytelling and creativity, but on the other hand, they had things that had buttons and lights and knobs that whizzed and made sparks, and I liked all that stuff. And Disneyland was the only place I could think of where you got to play with both sides of that.
Yeah.
So I started in September when I got to college. I started in September of '76 as a production assistant in live entertainment at Disneyland, which is really where I started my Disney career, and had a lovely time and did that for a while. And then in '78, me and a couple of yahoos, and we'll tell stories about this if you want, formed our own funny little group called Pony Farm Productions to help get Tokyo Disneyland done. And there's a whole bunch of stories there, but that's, so you want to go back to you? we can ping pong.
I'll also say you answered one of my questions, which was it ever a question for you of whether or not you would be working in Disney, considering your dad, considering how you grew up? So it's interesting to hear that you were like, no, I was not going in that direction at all. Yeah.
And my question would just to jump in real quick, because I love this book called Legacy, and one of the first lessons in this book called Legacy is about this rugby team is a lesson called sweep the sheds. So whenever someone I know has custodial experience, I always think of the feet to the ground kind of part of the legacy they have to an institution. And so I think that's always so cool. So I was going to tie that into it. I'm glad you mentioned storytelling, Bob. Is when did you know, like, this is my story? The company, being part of this company is going to be my story for a long time. I'll just throw that out there and let you guys pick the ball back up.
Yeah. Well, Bob, so mine's a little simpler. I always thought that I would be work at Disney's, starting at 16. I enjoyed it as an hourly. I went to school at the University of Florida, and I ended up getting an MBA. And when I got out, it's just right here. It just made total sense. And I had friends there, and we just kept on going. So I always knew. And Bob, I think you had to, though, sort of find that this was, where your path led, right?
It's a fascinating question. I love Frank's question. I can tell you exactly when that occurred and where I was the entertainment office at Disneyland in those days was on the upper floor of the attraction that started out as Carousel of Progress. That's what you know it is. But by then it had changed. It was called America Sings. And it was an audio animatronic tour of American music, and it was really fun. But our offices were upstairs from that, in a big round building, and there was a little, like a walkway, a balcony kind of thing. And I had stepped out of the office. I was between calls or something, and I stepped down. I was looking down at Disneyland, and I was thinking about that day and what was going on. I was like, and it just hit me. It hit me like a bag of cement. It's like, this is the best job in the world. This is almost to the point of saying, I wonder if they'll find out it's me, because this is such a good job. I'm sure if they knew it was me, they wouldn't give it to me. I mean, it really was. And to some extent, all jobs have ups and downs. And if you're around long enough, you have all those. But I don't think I ever lost that fundamental sensibility that, at least for me, the Walt Disney Company was not only the best, but probably the only place I would have been able to have a career.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. It's really, it's just, I love, kind of with just to go back to your dad again, that kind of origin story, but then you both have these different paths, in finding your way with the company. And like, for you to know, Rick, right away that you were in, and I was also friends with several campus friends.
Oh, you were? Okay.
I was at MGM Studios. And so I can connect to that as well, of just, again, seeing things from a different angle, a different point of view. You really opened your eyes to those things. I'm trying to think where I want to pivot next. I feel us in the late 70s, early 80s here. So I don't know if you want to take it to Tokyo, if you want to take it to
I can happily go there. So I was having a lot of fun being a stage manager at that point. I produced the Jazz Fusion show at Space Mountain, had a ball. But I made these two friends. One guy was from the Disney University. He was always had an audiovisual technology side of me, and he was like that. And he was a brilliant photographer. His name is Steve Casper. And the second guy was a guy named Tom Carr. Tom was an operator. He was an hourly, and then he got temporary duty promoted to kind of assistant soup level. And somehow we started talking, and we all hit it off, and we had in common an absolute Disney legend. It was a guy named Van France. And Van, if you know the story, Van was an old school labor relations guy. Came from the Consolidated Vultee Aircraft Corporation, which you know as Boeing. But Van was hired by Walt through Doc Lamont, who ran operations in those days, saying, we need a guy to come and negotiate with all these unions and make sure all that stuff works, what we now call HR. And that was Van. He said, oh, by the way, we're going to open in a couple months, and somebody needs to figure out how to train all these people.
Yeah.
So Van was the father of the Disney University. He invented it. He created it. He also famously hired Dick Nunes, who is also legendary and became our boss later. Yeah. Anyway, but at that point, Van was back consulting with Dick, and particularly on Tokyo, because it was a challenge. It was, look, we're going to do this, but we have no idea. We've never done anything outside the country. We don't know how to translate this stuff. I mean, it was really daunting. Yeah. So Van grabbed me and Steve and Tom, because he knew all three of us. He said, you guys ought to know each other. I'll bet you could help us out with this Tokyo thing. Well, we put our heads together and finally said, yeah, we can, and formed Pony Farm Productions. And we moved ourselves and our equipment out to the little farmhouse that had been on the property since before Disneyland was there. It's where Owen Pope, who was the original wrangler that worked at the farm, lived. Nobody was in it. So the guy who officially was the owner of it was the director of Main Street operations, who was a guy named Skip Palmer. And Skip was a guy our dad hired, who Rick and I later worked for, and then he later worked for me. But long stories.
It's the circle of life.
Hold the baby lion up. Hold him up. Yeah. So we called Skip and said, hey, is anybody using the old Pony Farmhouse? He said, no. I said, can we have it? He said, yeah, I have to clean it up. I said, great. So we moved in. It was fabulous. We had a garage, we had a basketball hoop, we had a barbecue in the backyard, fruit trees, we had the best stereo equipment on property, we had in-berm parking, and we were all by ourselves and could do kind of whatever we wanted. So we got attached to Tokyo to create all of the pre-opening training media, primarily, some marketing, made several films and got to go to Japan and train the executives. And so did that. And then just to finish out, when I finally realized I wasn't going to move to Japan, and I really wanted a piece of Epcot really bad, because it was, Walt's dream. And so I literally went and hung out at WED, now Imagineering, and went to meetings and just started doing things. And they eventually thought I worked there, so they gave me stuff to do, and so I did. I became an Imagineer.
You're like a Seinfeld episode over here.
Right. That is a Seinfeld episode.
Exactly right.
George did that, right?
You'd be in a meeting, says, who's that kid? I don't know, but he seems to be able to. Here, he does stuff. Have him go do stuff.
He knows what he's talking about.
Oh, no, I didn't have any of that. That was the beauty of working at WED, because maybe now too, I don't know, but in those days, you could literally be in a meeting and say, yeah, I know what we ought to do. We need to have a multi-layered fabric curtain animate itself out, pulled by auto animatronic flying bats that are all singing in Swedish. And they say, yeah, it's Steve. Go down. He's got the cubicle around. He knows. Yeah, flying bats. He's the bat guy.
He's our bat guy.
He's our bat guy. He does all the bat stuff. It was that kind of place.
Yeah.
And then just to finish mine, because the rest is boring, moved to Florida finally, because I needed to come down and open the Epcot shows that I had worked on. And we moved our entire Pony Farm unit, which was about 9 strong then, down to Florida, got attached to the marketing division, became a thing called Walt Disney World Media Productions, made television shows, and got to do a bunch of those Christmas morning shows on ABC and all that stuff. And then when the studio project got lit up, we were the logical bridge between the parks business and the motion picture business, which we needed if we were going to run a real studio. So I got a chance to go and be the studio side person on that project. And then I ran the Disney MGM lot, not the park, but the actual back lot for about 11 years. And then I got bored and had a midlife crisis and did some weird stuff. Tell you those stories later if you want.
That's the next book.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so but Rick, at this time you're already there.
Yes,
At
I
this time,
was
yes.
already there. Yeah,
Yeah.
as if you circle back time. So my trajectory went. You know, I'm an operating guy. So I'm
Mhm.
in operations, and so
Yeah.
you know, it's a lot of boots on the ground tarmac stuff. When I got out of college, I started at the Village, but you know, at
Mhm.
Saratoga Springs and all that is
Mhm.
now, and anyway, started in housekeeping and it was in the resort side of the business, and then front desk after that, and you know, literally, if I think back to all that, what I was learning at that time was really the Disney culture, and
Mhm.
it's unique, and we had the advantage of having, you know, Dad around, you know, on our back porch all the time, you know, talking about the stories of the day, so we could learn culture from that piece, but
Yeah.
we, you know, learned it from the front of the house too. And
Mhm.
so I did that, and really, if you kind of fast forward that along, I stayed in resorts for years. I had a 43-year career. I got to work at 16 different resorts. I got to be the general manager for 9 of them. Really fortunate to be able to do that.
Mhm.
Got to help open Euro Disneyland. That was a gas, with crazy stories there.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I got scared to death there one time. So a quick, you like tangents, didn't you
We
say,
We
love
Jen?
sure
them.
So you
do. We
like
love
tangents?
them.
So
Yes.
the tangent was, you know, we were there to open. So before it opened, and they were still building it, we were there on a task force,
Mhm.
and so middle of the night, me and my buddy Craig Hodges, we got bored. Come on, we got to get out of we were living in trailers. Let's get out and go do something. So we found our way into the park, which we weren't supposed to be in there, and it was, you know, there were some construction workers going on, but there really wasn't any operating people out there at all.
Mhm.
So we went and crawled underneath the castle, and we didn't know anything about, but there was a path. Have you been there?
Yeah, but didn't you finish the story and then
Yeah,
I'll
you
tell
know,
what
maybe you know where I'm going. We
Yeah.
didn't know what was under that castle, so we
Mhm.
wound underneath it, and it was dark because all the nothing was turned on and everything. And all of a sudden, we're down in this pitch dark part of this thing, and we hear this, and what the heck is that? And then this dragon that is the biggest animatronic figure I've ever seen in my life came to life, spewing fire, and you know, you got to imagine, we didn't know that was coming. We
Yeah.
ran out of there. We had to change our shorts after that. It was, and then we found out that was the coolest thing ever. But you know, it
Yeah.
was triggered by our motion, and it just
Mhm.
came to life.
It's like at the coffee pot the next day. It's like, well, I'll tell you one thing: these French guys are serious about security.
Yeah, right. Make sure they're keeping us out of there. Anyway,
No,
so that was part of
yeah,
the
I
fun.
went
Go
to
ahead, Frank.
I
Sorry.
went to Paris 10, 11 years ago, and we just went to Disneyland Paris for the day. And I tried as I did with Disneyland in February. I know enough, but don't deep dive before I go because I don't want the spoilers. Completely forgot about the dragon under the castle, and I was like, I got home, I was like, no, I have to go back now.
Yeah, you got to go see. You
Yeah.
got to go see that rascal.
That-
Anyway, so I ended up spending a lot of great. I got to help. I guess a career highlight. I got to be the opening general manager, me and my team, to help open Disney's Art of Animation Resort. So that
Yeah.
was fun. We got to do the planning and opening of that, and then I finished my career at Epcot, which Jen, you said you used to work there. Is that right,
Yeah.
or you were out there? So I was general manager of Future World for a couple of years, and
Yeah.
so I got to have a lot of fun out
That's
there.
where I was. I think you were there after I was there. I was there from like 2004 to 2006 in Innoventions,
Oh, cool.
the IBM exhibit. So I was
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Cool.
yeah, yeah,
an
yeah,
operating
yeah.
participant there. And yeah, so I worked on the floor, and then I had moved over and was like the liaison for events between IBM and Disney for a little bit. So I would hop around Epcot.
Oh, that's neat. Well, that's a
very
good
cool.
gig.
Yeah. That's fun.
Enjoyed that. Yeah, of course, all that's been redone now recently. I don't know if you've been out.
It's
It's
all
beautiful.
gone.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful out there now,
yeah.
but things have to change. Well,
Yeah.
so we are Epcotians, you
That's
and
right.
I.
Yes.
Well, and for
Youngins
me,
over here. That's where we're hanging
Hey,
out.
MGM is younger than Epcot. Come on.
I have to admit that Epcot will always be my favorite park.
Yeah. Mhm.
Partly because of how much I got to work on it, but Rick mentioned openings. Openings are for the park side of the company. There is nothing like one.
Yeah.
They are at once the horror of war and also the glory of an Olympics. I mean, it's both of those things mixed together several times a day, oscillating back and forth. But,
Yeah.
opening Epcot was really amazing, and never forget it. And then, of course, I got to help open the studio park, which that was really fun because I was in on every single design meeting and really watched it. And that was Epcot was marvelous, but Epcot still had the force of kind of the tablets from Walt. It was, listen, you're going to do this and we're going to do it this way. The team that did Studio Tour was a different approach. The head of that whole effort was Bob Weiss, who just retired as president of Imagineering. Bob's philosophy, and I still practice it, was look, from the first concept meeting, we're going to have everybody at the table. We're not going to do this thing where, hey, we're the designers, we'll figure it out, we'll call you guys later. You'd go around the table, operations, you good, security, you good, finance, you good. Really made a huge difference because that park opened Johnny on the spot. Its biggest flaw was we didn't build it quite big enough on opening day, but we fixed that later. But it was really fun to go through that opening, and again, openings are war. We opened the studio part a year before the park, and the reason was because the idea was we wanted there to already be lore about production by the time the first guest came. So see that spot over there? Well, that's where they shot. So we were shooting stuff with the Mickey Mouse Club, the new Mickey Mouse Club then, and the opening wasn't quite opening day, it was close. Opening week, gala week piece of horror was we were shooting a piece with Carol Burnett. It was a series on the Disney Channel called A Conversation With, and then it'd be, George Burns or some Hollywood, mocker. Well, so Carol Burnett's there, and it's late May, right around now, Florida, hot. And the way there was a flaw in the air conditioning. The way they designed the air conditioning in the sound stages is the air returns were above the grid. Well, you have to think about it. There's lighting up there, so the air it's intaking is about 10,000 degrees. And so it goes back to the chiller and it cools down to 8,000 degrees and then spits it back out. So it was really hot in there. And she was being a trooper, but all our brasses in the audience, all the invited guests. So it's like, we got to cool this place down. So I jumped on the phone and I called. I said, I need a portable air conditioning unit. I know there's some on property. How do I get one? They said, the only one we have is cooling the tent for Dick Nunes's cocktail party at the Grand Floridian. I said, thanks. I called Dick on his cell phone and said, I am sending some grips over in a dually truck. They're taking your air conditioner. And he said, why? And I said, because Carol Burnett's really hot. He said, send him. Like, send him over. We got ice, So we brought that thing over and ran this giant hose in and pointed it at her. And she said, see, everything's fine. In fact, the audience got mopey. They got grouchy. She said, I don't want to hear anything for you. You want to feel hot? Come up here. I got all this light on me. Those are opening stories, though. Those are the greatest.
Yeah. We have been lucky enough to talk to some of the Mouseketeers of the all new Mickey Mouse Club because we loved that show.
Yeah.
And they have told stories about being in the studios like before it was open and still some dirt on the ground and pavement not down yet. And it's so cool to hear all those like behind the scenes stories. Yeah.
Yeah, and the I worked there 95 to 98. I mean, I was still working a little bit in 99, but I went to UCF, so that was my working in the studios was my part-time job. But really, the park itself, opened when I was 14, going on 15, and all I did was thinking about going to Disney World and going to the movies and playing baseball. Those were the three things I did.
Nice.
So, that park really, I don't know if like I would be like a Disney adult if that park didn't open, because it combined these two loves of mine in the same place. And so then to have to get to work there was really, really cool. And yeah, I started working there right around when Toy Story opened, and it did the Toy Story parade and things like that. And
Were you in entertainment?
I was in entertainment. Yeah. So like I said, I was, I'm 6 feet tall. So I worked with Goofy and Woody and Genie a lot, over at the studio. So
Slinky Dog.
Was the Slinky Dog, a little Slinky Dog on Christmas Day.
Oh,
There's
cool.
a credit.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So, but what I want to talk about too is just the resort, how the resort changed down in Florida. And for you, Rick, like I remember my first trip before Jen was born was in '81. So, and I have faint memories of the Village Marketplace and that whole area. But to go from there to Art of Animation, I mean, that's a whole, transformation of how the resorts evolved over those years.
Yeah.
What do you see as some of the key moments in how things developed resort wise over that?
Well, so the coolest thing about that transition, and it's certainly over time, but we were lucky at Art of Animation that we were able to design that resort. And when I say design, we got to help. We were the operators that got to help, a little bit, but to be the most immersive resort that we had. And so you guys probably know it's themed on 4 movies, right? Little Mermaid and Lion King and Finding Nemo and Cars.
Yeah.
And so, we and Disney resorts are immersive as they can be. Certainly if you check into the Polynesian, people are going to say aloha, and they're going to say a mahalo, and it's about a lot about that ohana, but we got a chance to try to do that even further with those movies. And so, we instead of just the normal discussions you'd have with your guest, if we got to say, all right, we trained our cast, don't tell them if they ask for directions, don't say, well, go out those back doors and you see the pool and turn right, and your building is building 3. That's okay, but don't say that. What you need to say is, hey, sure, here's what you need to do. He said, you're gonna go down this where we have our huge chandelier with all the storyboards on it. We want you to go out that door, and you're going to see the big blue, which is where Finding Nemo and his friends are. We want you to turn right, and then you're going to see Route 66. Take Route 66 and go down past Flo's, Flo's, what was her resort called? Flo's Drive-In or whatever that was. Take a right. You're going to see Tomater there. Tell him I said hi, and and here's, by the way, the keys to your garage. And now that, because you're a car, when you're checking in, that all of the characters there at that part of the resort, they're sized so that you're sized to be like a car, about like a car. When you're going to Nemo, you're sized to be about like Nemo. So Crush is 3 stories tall because you're about that big, and all of that immersive stuff we got to train our cast to do. And I got to tell you, that was really a lot of fun. When you see guests little kids walk around, you can just say, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And they really got into that, and it was so much fun to be able to play with the guests better. I think that might be the biggest change.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite resort?
Yeah.
Whether you work there or one that you like to stay at, or maybe they're the same. I don't know.
So funny that over the years, everybody, it's a common question, and the answer when you're out there is the one you're working in now. Right? Of course, that is the one you're working in now. But I would say that now that I've retired, I loved Animal Kingdom Lodge. Disney's Animal Kingdom Lodge was just incredible. And I tell you one story that actually sometimes I tear up when we tell it. We had the cultural reps at the Animal Kingdom Park, but also at Animal Kingdom Lodge. And so they would come over from the other countries, for your audience that doesn't know, and they would come with us for 9 months to a year. And so they'd be from different places in Africa,
Yeah.
and they would come over, and we'd have like, I don't know, over 50 of them that would come, and they'd help represent their culture and tell stories to people about where they lived. And it was all about authenticity. And it was great. Well, when we got towards the end, we all got to know them quite well. And when they got to the end of their time with us, when they got ready to switch over and new ones were coming in, we'd have a graduation ceremony. And one year I was sitting with Joe Calla, who was our in charge of the animals when we were there, and he said, "Man, we got to do something different. We just have a breakfast for them." He said, "Why don't we do something in the lobby?" Okay, great idea. So we brought them out and we did this little thing, and I got to be the GM, so I got to say a few words, which means nothing to anybody, but they all got. And so, but they came. So we did our stupid little thing is in the lobby, and some guests started to crowd around. But one of them came up to me and said, "Hey, Rick, would you mind?" There's about 12 of us that are from, and I forgot the country, but X country in Africa. Would you mind if we sang our national anthem? Oh, absolutely. Awesome. Would you? Yeah, please do it. So they did, and people started coming to the rails, and it was just beautiful. And so everybody applauded, and I'm thinking, okay, that's it. You've had your little graduation. And then another group walked up and said, "Rick, could we do?" Oh, okay. So 8 of them came up and they did theirs. We got to the end, and there was this one young lady from somewhere, maybe Botswana or something. And she didn't ask. She just walked up. Wow. And this was not a microphone. We weren't, well, there was a microphone, I guess. She started, this one little lonely voice started singing this thing. And I tell you, we were all bawling. We were just crying. It was so sweet. And I remember at the end, a guest, we'd thrown this thing together like a day before. A couple guests came up to me and said, "Number one, this wasn't on the schedule. We didn't see this. My mother missed this, and she would have. And when is this happening next year so that we can schedule our visit to come down?" Yes, sir. We got you covered. I don't know why I came to that story. I forgot now where I got there, but anyway, it was because I love that resort, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's awesome.
That was my favorite resort job you had, because I liked hanging out there.
Yeah.
It's got such a good feel.
Yeah, it's got a good vibe, the good restaurants, good everything. Jen even ran over there her last visit, which was brief, to get some Sanaa bread service.
Yes.
Oh man, that is the best, isn't it?
Yeah.
You do all the dipping sauces.
I did. So I am now gluten-free, and I heard that they had a gluten-free version, and I was like, "Oh my God," because I've had the regular version and I have missed it so much. So
is it okay? Is the gluten-free okay?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's always hard to switch over when you know what it could be. So but the dipping sauces are still good, so that it works.
Yeah, you're right. And Gico too, and that wine room there, and Gico is just
so good.
So good.
Just the best.
That filet and a red wine sauce with mac and cheese. That's not even on the menu anymore. But...
Right. It's right. You can ask for it. You're right.
Yes,
you can ask for it. Yep. They'll do it. You're right. Yeah.
Well, I see us going towards the end of the first hour here.
Oh gosh.
But we're ready to keep it going into hour number 2. But I do want to kind of lead into your time after Disney, which has so much awesomeness to it, and the way that you've carried out what you experienced at Disney and what you learned at Disney into your post Disney time. I guess my question for both of you first would be, when you retired and the time was like, what is it? This part of Disney I love so much, I want to bring this into whatever I'm going to do afterwards.
Well, I loved it so much I bought it.
Right.
I mean,
you did.
So what happened with us was, this was the mid-90s, and there were a lot of things going on, and I won't give you all the nutty backstories, but it was time to make some changes. And so I had gone to meet with Al Weiss, who was the president of Walt Disney World, then somebody I'd known for a long time. And I said, "Look, what else is going on? I'm a little restless." And he said, "I don't know if you'd ever think about this." He said, I think you want to be a lot more entrepreneurial than you're going to be able to be and stay in the company, because it's a mature business now. It isn't, just isn't the cowboy days that you all came up with.
Yeah.
He said, I think I need the stuff you guys do, but I don't think I need to own it. Why don't you buy it from us and become an operating participant, and we'll be your clients? And I said, don't be nuts. I'm a guitar player. I didn't go to business school. I have no idea how to do any of those things.
Mhm.
And as you do, I came home and talked to her with my wife, and she said, yeah, you should think about that. That sounds like a really exciting opportunity. So that's what happened. We took a gigantic leap off a cliff. I went to a bank in Orlando and borrowed some money, and Disney made me an extraordinary deal. And we went home as cast members on Friday and came back on Monday with green IDs as operating participants, doing the same jobs we'd always done, but now we were doing them for ourselves.
Wow.
So that company became what is still called Ideas. That was the name of the firm. And that came from, we had used that name, an acronym version of that name, even as our Disney operation. It stood then for Imagery, Design, Entertainment, Art, and Sound, because we were doing post-production television. It later became, let's see, I'll have to see if I can remember the acronym, because we stopped using it a few years ago, but it was Innovation, Design, Entertainment, Art, and Storytelling was where we went with it. And the idea, here was our strategic plan. We went around the room and said, what do you like to do? And that guy would say, well, I like to do training. Okay, how about you? Attractions. I like to design rides. Good. You? How about you? What do you like? Well, I like to make video. Good. I said, let's do that.
Wow.
So we did. So we took the company private in 2001. The negotiations started in 97. The deal got done in 2001. Takes a while with Disney. And never looked back. We stayed on the lot for a few years. In 2008, we left the studio lot, went downtown, and had a nice run as a studio. And then in 2016 or 2015, we significantly downsized, just got to our core storytelling practice, and since then have been happily cranking out, destination entertainment and brands of all kinds all over the world. I sold the business 2 years ago, still work there. And Rick knows the guy who bought it. He's a nice young man, and he will eventually learn the business that he bought. And I got another 18 months or so of official contract time left. So that was my end game. But it's all been a very consistent journey. We're still doing exactly the same thing we started doing. We're just doing it in different ways.
Yeah.
Were your offices back down on the Sunset side?
No, they were in the Roy O. Disney building.
Okay.
Which was originally on the studio tour. The Roy O. building was where post-production was, and the tour went by our windows, and you could see in our machine room, and it was that building. That's where we lurked.
No. You lurked. All right, cool. Yeah, no, just try. I'm like, where were your offices?
Well, that's a good question. I hadn't been to the park in a long time, and Rick took me out there a couple months back because I wanted to see the Star Tour stuff or Star Wars stuff. I hadn't seen it, which, by the way, it's brilliant. But I would, had I not been with Rick, I would have been completely lost because the lot has changed. I didn't know where anything was. I saw the soundstage and said, no, that's not possible. That's not where I left those. How'd they get there?
No, it's wild. Walking through Toy Story Land, sometimes I'm like, I used to cross back here every day to go to the break room above the Great Movie Ride or whatever. And I'm like, it's so bizarre. Still, I've been there a lot now, and it's still, I'm like, I can't believe this is what it was, and this is what it is now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But how about you, Rick? I mean, I know one of your two of your big gigs after Disney. So let's talk about Give Kids the World first.
Oh, great. I just love that part. I got a chance to go work at Give Kids the World. So for people that don't know, Give Kids the World is in Kissimmee, Florida. It's about 165 villas, and they were created to help grant kids that have critical illnesses wishes. Like with the Make-A-Wish program. And the most common wish amongst people that are in that situation is to come to Florida and to come to the theme parks. And so there's no money. It's a completely free vacation for the whole entire family. They get to come down. They get tickets to Walt Disney World, Universal, SeaWorld. All the food is taken care of there. There's an ice cream. You can have ice cream anytime you want ice cream for breakfast, you can scoop it up, and it is an absolutely magic place to work and to see these kids. I got a chance to be the chief operating officer there for a couple of years, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's it's a wonderful place. If anybody, that's a great thing to support if you ever look at that. Yeah.
For sure.
And then you worked with the Special Olympics too, right?
Yeah, another good heartwarmer, although one of the hardest jobs I ever had, but it was really great. We had the 2022 Special Olympics USA Games got to come to Central Florida and mostly Walt Disney World in June of 2022. And so, they happen every 4 years, and man, what a ball, Special Olympics. And you say kids, but it's not kids, it's people of all ages that take advantage of them, that are part of Special Olympics everywhere. And they came down, man, we have 4,000 athletes and 2,000 coaches, and they played. And I got to tell you, man, there's some magic that goes on there. I don't know if you know this about Special Olympics. I can see it from our clock. We're probably over, but I'll tell you this part anyway.
Your time.
Yeah. If you go to a Special Olympics games, you get a free health exam. And for the USA Games, it's very extensive. I mean, they'll check your ears, and if you need hearing aids, they'll give them to you. They have them there, and they'll give you hearing aids. If you need glasses, they grind them and they give you glasses. They'll give you shoes. They'll give you, and there's like a 9-step health exam. And many of them, these kids and these people don't have that opportunity. And so there were countless stories out of these games where, there was one kid who got hearing aids, and I'll choke up, so I pause because I gotta be careful here. But who got hearing aids for the first time, called his mom for the first time from the games. He heard her voice for the first time from the games because of and so you think about all the good things that Special Olympics can do. There's miracles like that happen. And it's funny, that kid played basketball. He was on a basketball team. And so he told his coach, Coach, I got hearing aids. He says, I can hear. And the coach said, yeah, now when I holler at you on the court, you got to listen to what I say. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So wonderful organization. Their next games are in 2026 out in Minneapolis, and so they're doing great work out there.
That's awesome.
Well, we've done some work together too.
I know. I want to go. I know you just did the storytelling conference, so I want to know what that's like. Post is like. Well, when you get together and you get into each other's heads. What happens?
A couple different layers. What I was thinking of is Rick's actually come on when we do major projects at Ideas. We very much carry on the tradition of bringing in all the disciplines. So we're working together right now, for instance, on a brand new destination in San Juan, Puerto Rico called Bahia Urbana Park. And Rick's been leading the lodging operations side of that consulting work. And we've just inaugurated a brand new product that we're in sort of alpha test on we're calling the Ideas Experience Design Playbook. It's a thing that Rick represents the operations point of view, and somebody from our team, sometimes me, sometimes others, represents the design point of view. And we have a 27-point, process that we go through to help destination owners and operators get better. To say, hey, look, here's what you're doing great, but here's where you need to pay attention, and here's why that's important. And by the way, we can help you if you want. So we've had a lot of fun working together.
We sure have. Yeah, we've got that, and so there's consulting that goes on with the Ideas group, and you referenced though too, Frank. The other thing that we've started is we're like to give talks, and so we and it's funny, you said we got in each other's heads. There's a famous about 3 days we went to the beach. And we sat out, looking at the ocean, and we said, all right, what stories do you remember about Dad? And what stories do you remember about, remember the time that Dad met Walt at the airport and he almost killed him driving him back home? Yeah, write that down. And so we ended up after 3 days with 107 stories. And a couple of them we shared here, but and then we've taken those stories that are a look behind the scenes, and we say 102 years. I appreciate you saying that in the beginning, and the people are going to look at us and go, "Wait a minute, that math don't rhyme." But that we include Dad's Dad's
Yeah.
tough. He was 33
Yeah.
years. Or
Yeah, Dad was 33, you were 43, and I was 26. Yeah.
26. And so we added them all up and we get all that.
Yeah.
But we think those stories are our stories that we've got to experience. Listen, there are a whole lot of great books about Walt out there. And there's a lot of great books about the Disney company out there, and they're great. But we're not using most of those. What we like to talk about are things that we might have heard on the porch or happened to us or happened to Bob. And then we can tie those to, lessons and life lessons and things that have happened. And boy, this is what the culture's like out at Disney. And so we've given quite a few talks, and we hope to give quite a few more.
Yeah, we call that experience Tales of Mouse and Men.
Yes. I love the title of it. It's so great. Jen, do you have is there anything else that you wrote the agenda, and I feel like I didn't look at your agenda one.
Do I? Please. No, I'm just, first of all, a little bit jealous because there's so many more stories we haven't heard. So I mean, we're gonna need to hear those. I love that you have this personal twist on it, because like you said, there are such great books and so many people have their own stories, but you have this personal experience that not many other people had, and you grew up in this world, for lack of a better term, that and to be able to share those experiences and share those stories and share all your life lessons is so, I feel like, invaluable to anyone. And I love the way both of you tell the stories and how you can pick up where the other one's leaving off. And we really could have just let you guys talk. We didn't need to interrupt at all. And you guys could just go the whole time. No, it's so great to hear that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's nice of you to say that. We have a lot of fun doing it. We're certainly at the points of our careers where we're not going to do anything unless it's fun, and so we're trying to we're trying to do that, and we keep writing new stuff all the time, and so we'll love being on with y'all.
Yeah, neither one of us believe in retirement, so
it never worked.
A myth, won't work. So yeah, invite us back. We have plenty more stories.
Oh,
done.
If you'd like to at this time, if you want to promote or plug or anything else that you just want to throw out there that everyone listening should grab onto, I'll just leave that space here for a moment for you both.
You want to start, Bob? Or I can start. We can give
start.
I'll start. So the young guy starts.
Yeah, that's right.
Younger guy. Well, so I do have Rick Allen Consulting Group. That's me, and so group means me and my wife. Actually, is what that means. But
and Kai
and my dog Kai and our dog Kai. Well, my two kids that are still around. But anyway, rickallenconsultinggroup.com is the place that you can look up the website. And again, I do consulting, as Bob mentioned, and we really love talking about things. We've got our Tales of Mouse and Men. I also have a culture talk called Culture Tales that talks a lot about Disney culture, and because it's a very successful culture. And so I think there's lots of lessons to be learned from that too, that we can talk about. And I'm finishing up another talk about how it's called Making It Work, and how we had a lot of different challenges being the operator in, okay, you've got to go figure out how to make this work. And we did. We figured out, and there's lots of great lessons that come from that I think lots of companies could learn from as well. And so that keeps me busy. And Bob, you mentioned ideas, but you also have your own.
Yeah. So my next new little venture is called the Zennovation Network. That's innovation mashed up with Zen, two of the things I love to do. So you can find that online at zennovationnetwork.com, ZENNOVATION.com, zennovationnetwork.com, sorry. And yeah, it's similar. I have several talks that I've developed. One is about, as you might imagine, innovating. We call it Zenovating, and it really is a combination of, mindfulness meets kind of nutty creativity. There's the Tales of Mouse and Men work that Rick and I are doing. I have another piece I call Restorying, which is really applying the deep art of story making to everything from how to make your life better to how to make your brand wake up. And then a couple of workshops that really take a day or 2 days are these are sort of under development. One of them is called Becoming Unboxed. It's really going to be fun. It's a former Disney colleague of ours, a woman named Dee Burns, who was my HR coach at Disney. Dee's a well-known leadership coach now, and a marvelous young woman named Lisa Sibilia, who runs a company called Utopian, and she is a technology and human agency genius. And you can just swim around in that a little bit. But the three of us have come up with what we think is a very interesting way to literally help people get out of their box. That's one. And the other one that'll be online by, I don't know, probably mid-year next year, is a long-standing colleague of mine, one of my longest held friends. She and I have known each other for 56 years. Her name is Kelly Pounds, and she's an educator by trade and a trainer. And we developed a workshop called Show Up, Create, and Serve. And it's really for leaders to really want to take their leadership game to the next level. So that's all, that's all what's on our plate.
Oh, is that it? Just I mean,
well, if we don't have that list, then we've got to clean the attic, and so we'd rather whiteboards.
Yeah, the honeydew list gets too long if we don't look busy. That's why I'm in this closet. I said, I gotta work, honey. No, I can't. No,
possibly.
Big doings. Big doings.
What I love about talking to both of you is you start with the premise, and then I feel like I just see doors opening up while you're talking. Like I just see your brain open up almost, and then all of a sudden you're throwing out these other things. I'm like, whoa, it's multi-layered. Everything you guys have so many layers. I love it so much, and that's what I have loved about some of these conversations we've had the last couple of months, and this one is no different. Where it's just so rich in the Disney history and the connection, not just to the company, but to the people that you've inspired and touched and created with. It's it's stuff that speaks to us a whole lot, and like we joked at the beginning, we're just gonna keep talking, and we could just keep going on these stories, and so hopefully we can do this again sometime, because it's so tremendous to hear them, and for you guys to be able to share them, and to be able to to talk like this is just it made an impact on us from when we were kids to to when we were working there to now just doing this podcast. I mean, it's part of the reason why we do it, is because we know these experiences have existed, and we want to hear them all the time and share them as much as possible.
Yeah.
So thank you.
The Dillo's Diz podcast is hosted by Frank Cardillo and Jen Cardillo-Snyder. Music produced by Matt Harvey. Logos and video production courtesy of Snidillo Studios. Dillo's Diz Resort is our Patreon, with tiers starting as low as $1 per month. You can visit dillosdizresort.com to learn more. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, X Twitter, and Facebook at Dillo's Diz. Check us out on YouTube by visiting youtube.com/DillosDiz. Don't forget to like and subscribe while you're there. We also have merch available on TeePublic and Etsy. For all this and more, visit our one-stop shop, dillosdiz.com. Dillo's Diz Podcast 2025.